couple of years ago, the University of Hawaii did a research project on how many grains of sand there are on the whole of the planet. So you've got a cup like this. It's a mixture of various sizes. There'd be, they reckon, about 2 million or so grains of sand in that cup. Smaller grains, more. It was something like 1 times 10 to the power of 18. That's a lot of grains of sand, but it's all the beaches of the world, all the deserts, all the sandy deserts, all out of them. But here's the thing that the scientists have told us, that there are vastly more stars in the universe than there are grains of sand on the planet. And stars are a fair bit bigger. And it raises the question with us, if the universe is that big, how small are we? How sort of insignificant are we with all of our problems and pains and joys? I'd never thought about that much until after I became a Christian. I'd been an atheist, became a Christian. I was at a party in Wollongong and I met this young man who was an astronomer, professional astronomer. And we were chatting away for a while, and then I said to him, what's your reason for not being a Christian? Bit cheeky, but I thought I might as well ask. And while he was thinking about his answer, I then asked a stupid follow-up question. I said, do you have some problem with becoming Christian because of the studies of the sciences that you've done? And he looked a bit irritated with me, with my question, and he said, of course not. He said, the longer I study the laws of physics and the maths that hold the whole thing together, it's crystal clear there has to be a brilliant mind behind it and before it. I know, he said, I've got no problem with that, but he said, have you got any idea just how pathetic you Christians are when you say that the God who made all this vast universe cares about you and even use the word love? Well, I had to be honest and say, no, I've never thought about it. It does sound a bit crazy, doesn't it? You'd want to have pretty good evidence to believe that you did matter in such a vast universe. And even if there is a God, if that God has remembered you and cares at all. But this concern about the vastness of the universe, and does that make us so small that we're insignificant, is not actually a new concern. Let me read you from Psalm 8. It's a psalm, a poem written by King David, you know, David and Goliath, that story perhaps. But he writes this: when I consider your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars which you've set in place, what is mankind that you're mindful of them? What are human beings that you would care for them? See, he looks at the vastness of the stars. He didn't understand what they were made of. He didn't understand the numbers. But both the astronomer and King David realized it's so big. He said, when I consider that, what are we? I mean, how significant can we possibly be when we're so tiny in such a vast universe? Are we, just as some people have said, chance products in a mindless universe? Right? Mindless, vast, cold and indifferent to us. Is that the truth of the matter? Are we in the end VIPs? Very insignificant people. Very insignificant. Not VIPs, very important people. But to be honest, if there's no God, of course we're VIPs. We're very insignificant. And we'll all be gone in a split second. We're all just bags of chemicals, wet computers, in a vast, vast universe. We had a wonderful lady come and give a lecture at our church, Dr. Jennifer Wiseman. She's the senior astronomer at NASA, head of the Goddard Space Institute, and she was saying that in the Milky Way, and beautiful picture she had, in the Milky Way, there's 100 billion stars. There's under 8 billion humans on the whole of the Earth, but there's 100 billion stars just in our Milky Way. It helps me to get a sense of the size of these things. If you imagine, this is the way scientists describe it, if you imagine that the Milky Way with its 100 billion stars is the size of Australia, okay, and you're above Australia, you're looking at the whole thing, you take the whole country in, how big is the solar system that we inhabit? It's the size of this 5-cent coin in the whole of Australia. And the Earth itself is practically invisible in that, this tiny third rock from the sun. We are very small. Does that mean that we are actually, as we sometimes feel, pretty insignificant and pretty unimportant? What David knows is what Jesus goes on to say as well, which is, though the universe is vast, God does care. And actually the word that David uses in the second line there in verse 4, what are human beings that you care for them? Actually is the word that it's got the sense of that you go out to look for. You care about something, so you go out to meet it. And this is, of course, what's at the heart of Christianity. It is that God has actually come out to meet us. He hasn't just sort of sat back in calm, well, I wonder how they're doing, right? But he's come to find us. So if we're honest, we're either very insignificant or perhaps we are very important, as Jesus teaches. There's a fellow called James Irwin. Those of you who are space buffs will know who he is. He's one of the men who's walked on the moon. And he says this. He says that humans have walked on the moon is interesting, but that God has walked on the earth, that's important. Like many of the astronauts, he's a genuinely Christian man. He says, what we did was exciting and interesting, but that God has walked on the earth, that's really important. That we are the visited planet, that God has come and walked amongst us and lived amongst us and died for us. And he is, as we've said, the God with scars. We're not just very insignificant people, but actually to God, you matter to the one who matters. Nobody loves you or me like he loves us. You may not have yet discovered and tasted his love, but gee, it's worth discovering. That huge God should come down to this tiny, ridiculously small planet and love and live and die for us and then rise again. That is so exciting. And that's the God that Jesus reveals to us. Well, if this whole Jesus thing is true, it's very exciting. And we'd love to help you discover the stuff that we've discovered. And so we'd like to offer you these free books. And they're absolutely, completely free because we just want people to get a chance to look at Jesus as adults. And so the first one is a book that looks through the evidence, More Than a Carpenter, and will take you through some of the specific reasons why millions and millions look at the evidence and get convinced Jesus is the God who has come and visited us. We'd love to send you that. You'd enjoy reading that. And also a copy of one of the original biographies of Jesus. And you can read it for yourself as an adult. So click the button below and we'll get the books to you as quickly as we can. On the other hand, you might also like to subscribe to our channel and to chat with us perhaps over Facebook. Love to hear from you, and we'd love to be of any help that we can be. Thanks a lot.